Joining us right now on the latest jobs report, the firing of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the impending departure of Fed Governor Adriana Kugler, and what this all could mean for the U.S. Central Bank as former Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester. She's now an adjunct professor of finance at UPenn's Wharton School and a CNBC contributor. And Loretta, thanks for being here. Small order of business, just a few things happening. What did you think about the numbers on Friday, first of all?
Well, certainly changes your view about the labor market. I mean, it was a very weak report, and we know there's less momentum there, and the downside risks to the labor market have certainly gone up. But it also shows that there's some balance in that it wasn't only that we got demand for labor going down, we also got supply going down. So that's why the unemployment rate didn't go up very much. But it does change your view of what's happening in the labor market. And so the Fed's going to have to take that into account when it meets in September.
If you were there still and a voting member, would you vote to raise rates or to lower rates at this point?
Well, I think why the Fed did what it did in July was because there's a lot of data coming out before the September meeting. So I'd want to look at the rest of the data. If we get another employment report that confirms that the data that we got just on Friday, that there's weakness, and we also got some more data on inflation that says that the non-tariff related inflation continues to decline, which is what we've been seeing on the service side, then I think there would be a case to moving the interest rate down a bit, especially if you think that right now we have a restrictive policy. But there are going to be people on the other side of that too, because it's a real balancing act between those two goals. We know inflation is going up. So I know Joe was saying that the Fed isn't data dependent, but remember, it's data dependent, but it also has to be forward looking. So of course it has to really think about inflation.
That'll be the day, Loretta. That'll be the day.
So I think that's the issue. You know, it's how
they need to buy a new. They need to buy a crystal ball. You can buy those. You can buy those.
That's the nature of policymaking. That's what makes it difficult, and that's why the revisions in the data. There's an economist who retired from the Richmond Fed, who said that policy making is a little bit of guess and correct because you're always going to see data being revised. That's not a political statement. Data gets revised, and as it gets revised, you may change your view, not only of where the economy is going, but also where it is. And I think that's how I interpret the report we got on Friday. It changes your view of what's going on in the labor market. Now we're going to have to see if that's confirmed in future data.
Okay, you said just now that the data is not political, that the data gets revised. Was this a larger than normal revision? How does it match up to the data you've seen in the past? And just how good do you think the data is?
Well, the BLS is a very reputable compiler of data. Let's just put that on the table. It's an apolitical organization. That said, you know, we've seen that data has been revised over time, and especially since COVID, both models and data have been subject to bigger revisions. And that just, I think, is an indication that we should be supporting the agency in modernizing its data collection efforts. And what the president did by firing the head of the agency is not constructive in that way at all. We should be supporting them to give them more resources so they can improve their data collection and compilation of data, not undermining the agency. And I view what happened on Friday as being an undermining of the agency, which is not going to be helpful.
So what needs to happen next? Can we trust the numbers that come out of the BLS in the months to come?
Well, I think we're going to trust the numbers, but I think it's going to be crucial that they put in a new head that has impeccable apolitical credentials and someone who understands not only data, but also understands how to run an agency like the BLS and to bring in new ideas, new research, and really understand that, you know, you can put out data, it's going to get revised, but then you have to work to improve your methods and to be explaining why the data got revised as best as you know. And I think that can be improved, but all agencies are always working through that. The BLS is long-standing working on trying to improve its methods, and they have some of the best statistical people in the country working there. So again, I think what happened on Friday was very unfortunate, and it does lead to questions that you're asking, Becky, as can we trust the data? I would say for now, we're going to trust the data, but it remains to be seen of what happens there. And I think it's very very unfortunate what happened.
Loretta, do you know why the numbers have gotten worse since COVID? What's wrong with the models? What's wrong with how we're collecting the
Well,
numbers
there's two things
with?
going on. One, we do have lower response rates to the survey. So a lot of the data is collected by surveying firms, and the response rates, if you look, have gone way down. And so that's something that's important. So at each time it's revised, you're getting more, the agency gets better data. The revision is going to be bigger because there's more data that go into it. And then the model is, the economy has changed. So there's structural changes in the economy. If you're estimating things based on models that were based on the way the economy acted before COVID, you're going to have bigger errors. That happened in a lot of the models, on not just on the data, but just modeling the economy has changed. So again,
Loretta,
the world has changed, and it's hard to keep up sometimes.
So if I made you in charge of the BLS, what would be the first 2 or 3 things that you would do that would be also considered apolitical? Because what's going to happen here is somebody's going to get named to this job, and they're going to get in this job, and whether they announce it or not, they're going to probably try to adjust models, perhaps, try to adjust how they collect data, maybe even the incentives to collect. I don't know what they're going to have to do to make this all different. But if you were, if you had the first meeting with that new person, you would tell them what?
I wouldn't necessarily go out and change a model right away, but the BLS has done a lot of research on where the data has been missing, what their models look like. I would be much more proactive in getting that out and talking about that more than perhaps they've been doing in the past. I would get that out in front of people so that they understand, right, the thought that goes into constructing those data and what they have.
So you would not actually be trying to change how to, but I guess the big issue is, how do you modernize the collection of the data so you don't have the revisions, so you actually get the data in the months you're supposed to get the data, you're not waiting for the data to come in later, and all of those issues? That's irrespective of what the model looks like.
Yeah. No, I know, but a lot of it is they have been doing some of that work, and they all are bringing alternative data sources into it. So a lot of the agencies have these experimental data series. You could do more to explaining that to the public and to the users of the data, right? Businesses use it. It's not just the government uses it, not just policymakers. A lot of people use the data. So they understand there are alternative looks at the data, right, that can help you get a better sense of where the economy is going. Just think about what happened during the run up to the pandemic. The JOLTS data became a very important source of data. A lot of people hadn't heard of that data before, right? That's a job opening turnover survey. Now we look at it routinely. There's a lot of data at the BLS that can help inform people about what's happening in the labor market. And I think it's a little opaque to people who aren't experts and aren't in there. They could do a lot more, I think, to publicize that and to really publicize the great work they are doing.
Loretta, we've got to run, but do you think the private sector now does better data collection? There are a lot of other numbers we look at, whether that be ADP or Bank of America numbers, all kinds of different numbers. At the Fed, would you look at those numbers too?
Well, we always looked at those numbers at the Fed. I continue to look at alternative data sources because you do want to get other lenses on what's going on. But remember, the government data has always been the gold standard of data collection, and we want to make sure that we maintain that. You want to have one source that you can go to that's reliable, that is apolitical, that gives you the best view of what's going on. And I would submit that BLS has been doing that. Now what we need to do is make sure they have the resources and the support for continuing to do that and to modernize as the economy has changed over time. So that's my hope, is that going forward, we'll be able to support that.